Welcome to our Facebook group, Grow It, Cook It, Eat. Today I'm going to show you my take on making French onion soup. It's January 15th, so we don't have onions coming out of the ground or garlic here in Maryland Zone 7. We're in the middle of winter, but the time is from the garden. Come later spring, early summer, we're going to have plenty of onions, plenty of garlic to make French onion soup. Ingredients. I like to start with 6 large yellow sweet onions, cut them down to about 1/8 of an inch. When you're caramelizing onions, you don't want them to be too thin. You're going to need a half a stick to a stick of butter, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 3 cloves of garlic. If you don't like garlic, go ahead and omit it. Thyme, of course, that'll go in when we're caramelizing the onions and it'll be removed. That's Gruyere cheese. You can use provolone, you can use Parmesan if you want. That is a half a cup of brandy. You can use a 1/4 cup or you can omit it if you don't want that, but this is a good flavor to finish off the onion soup. Black pepper, Himalayan sea salt, any salt is perfectly fine, and 1 or 2 quarts of beef broth. And to get started, we caramelize the onions. They're all going to get cut up like this, put into a large frying pan. I'm going to show you that process. A pinch of salt, draw out the flavor. Over a 30 to 45 minute period on medium to medium high heat, we're going to caramelize the onions down. That's going to start with 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You can put the butter in right away, but butter sometimes burns. So if you're just doing this for the first time, you could add the butter a little bit later, like halfway through the process. Let me get the frying pan set up, the onions cut down, and I'll show you the next step. All right, now the caramelization process is going to take 30 to 40 minutes. Medium heat to medium high heat. You don't want it up so high that you burn your onions. Every 5 minutes, you're going to be in there just keeping the onions moving. Now this is 4 onions in here, and you can see how high it's up. The more onions you put in, the more moisture that's going to get drawn out. I got to put in my pinch of salt. Salt will help pull out the moisture from the onions. If you have too many onions in there, you get a lot of liquid and the onions are going to steam and they're going to break up a little bit more than if you have less onions in there. And in fact, I'll show you this pan over here in a second. But 4 onions works pretty well. If you haven't done this before, sauteing onions down, you're going to want to use 2 onions to start. But I'll show you how to do that in a second. And this is all you're going to do. Every 5 minutes, keep an eye on it, keep it moving around. You want the liquid to reduce out, you want the onions to brown, you want the sugars to caramelize, and again, 30 to 40 minutes. Now that's 4 onions in there. Oh, actually, let's toss the butter in there, let that melt down. So that's 2 onions, and you can see that there are obviously less onions in there, but it's less onion to surface ratio. These are going to brown up a lot more quickly. Same thing, just keep it moving. So the more onions you have in the pan, the more liquid that's going to draw out, and they're sort of going to steam. These onions will stay much more together. They'll look just like this, and it's just a little bit about the presentation. You know, whole onions that are browned out look a little bit better in onion soup, but the flavors are going to be exactly the same. Let me brown these down, or let me actually get them halfway through. I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll do a little bit more, and I'll show you the onions when they're fully caramelized. So here we are about 10 or 15 minutes in. This is the 4 onions. You can see still lots of liquid in there. I just added my garlic in now. I don't like putting it in right at the beginning because sometimes if garlic gets a little bit burned, it gets bitter, so I like putting it in towards the end. I'll also add in my sprig of thyme now. And again, every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes, you want to keep watching this. And you can see it's starting to get brown. Those are the sugars starting to caramelize. You want all the liquid to evaporate out. The onion flavor concentrates. Again, 4 onions here. Now here are the 2 onions. They are browning much more quickly. The ratio to oils and fats in here is much lower. Onions to the fat ratio is much lower. So they're going to brown up quicker than the 4 onions. If you've just done this, if you're just sauteing for the first time, I would start with 2 onions and see how it goes. Now you can see they're browning up nicely. The edges are a little bit crisp. You don't want this to happen. That means they're starting to burn. And I was actually upstairs on the Facebook group, Grow It, Cook It, Eat It, lost track of time, and they started to burn just a little bit. 2 onions are going to take you 20 to 30 minutes to caramelize down. The 4 onions are going to take probably 30 to 45 minutes. And I'll keep working on these and show you what it looks like at the end. So here we are about 25 to 30 minutes in. The 4 onions look like this. They are caramelizing and they're getting close to being done. And you can see lots of liquid still in there. And the 2 onions are finished. So this is what you want it to get down to. A nice caramelized brown color. This is ready to go into the soup. A couple of tips. So for a pan this size, 3 large onions is about perfect. You should be able to handle that. And when you start, especially if you're doing this the first time, and one of the hardest things to do is tell people what temperature something should be at because stoves vary so greatly. But definitely start at medium heat. Start low and work your way up, because if you just step away for that minute too long, it's going to burn. You don't want that to happen. I'm going to let the rest of these caramelize, and then they're going to go into a pot. Ratio, 32 ounces of a beef broth, 3 large onions to 1 container. And again, I don't cook with exact recipes, kind of principles like how I garden, but it's 1 32-ounce container of beef broth to 3 large onions, and we're going to also add some brandy to that. So let me finish this up and we'll get to the next step. So there's not much left to it at this point. The onions have been caramelized down. So this is 1 quart of the beef broth, and again, it's about 32 ounces to 3 large onions. I have 6, and you can use a little bit more, you can use a little bit less, however you want to do it. The onions are going to absorb some of this too, because you've been basically caramelizing them down and removing a lot of the moisture. Here are my onions. They're all going to go in. Oops, slow down. The butter didn't burn. The onions didn't burn. This is a very slow process, and most of the work obviously is with the onions. And then just mix it all in. You want to bring this up to a boil. And just to save you some time, let's just say this is at a boil. So I like to put in a 1/4 cup of an inexpensive brandy per container, just like this. So this is 2 containers. I'm going to put the brandy in, and usually put it at the end. Once it comes up to a boil, go ahead, pour the brandy in, let it boil a couple of minutes. Alcohol actually evaporates at a lower temperature than water, so the alcohol will evaporate out. But all you have to do is really heat this through to a boil. Let me get it there, and then I'll just show you how I set it up with the Gruyere cheese. You can use, again, Parmesan. You can even use provolone cheese. Okay, it's come up to its boil. This is what I add in my last dash of salt. I've already tasted it. A dash of pepper. And this is always the hardest part on video. It's the plating. So I'm just going to put it into a cup. And it turned out really, really nicely. Nice big chunks of onion. Again, the hardest part is, not really hardest, but the most time-consuming part is sauteing the onions down. Fill it up about 3/4 of the way. It's very, very hot. This is where you can put on some croutons. I actually like to get hard pretzels and crush them and put them on there. Before you do that, drop some cheese on the top, let that melt. You put your pretzels. Not very French oniony, but this is how I like to do it. A little more cheese. Let the cheese melt, and you have so this is an alternative ending, as the upload killed off the end of the video. Fill your cup up with some soup, and in this case, instead of pretzels, I'm going to put the cheese down. And here are my croutons, French bread, just put under the broiler. And right on top of that, I'm going to add some Parmesan cheese. Now this soup smells delicious. Not only is it the onions and butter, but once you add in the brandy, it really pulls everything together. I want to encourage all of you to shoot videos of your garden, take pictures of your garden, and even, videos of what you're cooking. Don't worry about making a mistake. That's how we learn. Enjoy, and I will see you in Grow It, Cook It, Eat It. Thanks.